She lived. Stop making her our problem. I stared at the glowing screen of my phone, the sterile, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor filling the deafening silence of the intensive care unit. My 6-year-old daughter Zuri lay in the hospital bed beside me, her tiny chest rising and falling beneath a maze of plastic tubes after a grueling 9-hour open-heart surgery. I had sent exactly one photograph to our family group chat. Just one, showing her pale, fragile but breathing. "She wants to see you," I had written. My brother Marcus's reply came first. "Busy. Handle it." Then my mother Beatrice delivered the final blood-freezing blow. "She lived. Stop making her our problem." My name is Kendra. I am 34 years old, and in the elite status-obsessed circles of Atlanta's Black high society, I am the phantom daughter, the disappointment, the one they hide away. Before we get into how I made my entire family drop their phones at exactly 10 o'clock tonight, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. If you have ever had to sever a toxic bloodline to protect your peace, hit that like and subscribe button. You are going to love this. I sat still, my thumb hovering over the cracked screen of my phone. Zuri had just survived a procedure that the top pediatric surgeons in Georgia gave a 50% survival rate. I had spent the last 48 hours pacing the linoleum floors of the waiting room drinking coffee and praying to a God I hoped was listening. My mother and brother had not called a single time. They were too busy preparing for the social event of the season, a massive corporate gala designed to elevate Marcus from a failing tech bro to Atlanta's newest business mogul. My role in their lives had always been minimal, reduced to the scapegoat who ruined my mother's country club image by dropping out of grad school to raise a child alone. Beatrice had never forgiven me for that. In her world of debutante balls, charity luncheons, and relentless networking, a single mother with a sick child was a liability. She had spent years telling her wealthy friends that I was simply traveling overseas, completely erasing Zuri and me from the carefully curated family narrative. Marcus, on the other hand, was the golden boy. He could do no wrong. Even when his reckless investments drained the family accounts, Beatrice smiled and wrote another check praising his entrepreneurial spirit. "Well, at least the hospital validation covers valet parking." A sharp nasal voice sneered from the doorway, completely shattering the fragile peace of the recovery room. I looked up, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. Standing there wearing a pristine white designer blazer and holding an iced matcha latte was my sister-in-law Lauren. Lauren is white, comes from a moderately wealthy family in Buckhead, and has spent the exact 5 years of her marriage treating my brother Marcus as an exotic social credential to parade around her privileged circles. She stepped carefully into the intensive care unit, wrinkling her nose as if the scent of medical-grade antiseptic personally offended her delicate sensibilities. "Lauren," I said to her, my voice hoarse and raw from disuse, keeping my hand gently resting on Zuri's thin hospital blanket. "You actually came here." "Oh, please do not flatter yourself, Kendra." She sighed heavily, loudly checking her diamond-encrusted watch with an exaggerated flick of her wrist. "I am certainly not here for a touching family reunion. Do you have any idea how hard it was to find this wing? The signage in this hospital is atrocious, and the valet actually expected me to leave my keys with some teenager. I had to threaten to call the hospital administrator just to get proper service." I stared at her, utterly bewildered by her sheer lack of empathy. My daughter was hooked up to a ventilator fighting for every breath, and Lauren was complaining about the parking staff. "Zuri just got out of surgery, Lauren. If you are not here to check on her, then why are you standing in this room?" Lauren rolled her eyes, taking a slow, deliberate sip of her green drink before walking closer to the bed. She did not even glance down at her 6-year-old niece. Her eyes remained fixed on me, cold and calculating. "Marcus and your mother are hosting a massive gala tonight. We are securing a highly lucrative merger with Apex Medical. We need capital quickly, and your stubborn, ridiculous refusal to sign the paperwork is holding up the release of your grandfather's trust fund." She reached into her leather tote bag, rummaging past sunglasses and makeup. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor seemed to speed up slightly, matching the sudden spike in my own pulse. I could feel the familiar weight of my family's demands pressing down on my chest, threatening to suffocate me in the sterile room. They had not sent flowers or a card. They had sent the most entitled member of our family to extract money from me while my child lay sedated and vulnerable. You came to an intensive care unit to talk about a trust fund, I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous quiet register that she completely failed to recognize as a warning. I stood up slowly, crossing my arms over my chest and staring at her. You are unbelievable. I came to get what Marcus deserves. She snapped back, her tone dripping with unearned superiority. We don't have time for your typical dramatic victim routine today, Kendra. The Apex executives are flying in this evening, and Marcus needs to show substantial liquid assets to prove his firm is solvent. You will sign the release forms right now, or Beatrice is going to make absolutely certain that you never see a single dime of that family money anyway. Lauren reached into her oversized, expensive designer tote bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. She tossed it casually onto the sterile hospital bed. It landed with a heavy thud, the corner of the stiff cardboard brushing against the delicate plastic tubing connected to my daughter. I immediately lunged forward to move it, my hands shaking with a mixture of exhaustion and rising anger. Lauren just watched me with an amused smirk on her face. She adjusted the collar of her pristine white blazer and crossed her arms. Sign it, she commanded. The firm needs that capital injection now. I looked down at the folder, recognizing the seal of my grandfather's estate lawyer printed on the front. This was the exact trust fund document, the one my mother had been trying to force me to surrender for the past 3 years. You brought a legal waiver into a pediatric intensive care unit, I asked, keeping my voice dangerously low so I would not wake Zuri. My daughter just had her chest cracked open 9 hours ago. She is fighting for her life, and you are standing here demanding I sign away the only financial security my grandfather left me. Lauren let out a sharp, dramatic sigh, clearly annoyed by my lack of compliance. Oh, please, Kendra, spare me the struggling single mother routine. We all know you only kept this baby to rebel against your mother's expectations. Beatrice is humiliated by your life choices. You dropped out of a prestigious top-tier law program to work some obscure data entry job living in a neighborhood I would not even drive through with my doors locked. Now you expect us to cater to your emotional breakdowns, while Marcus is actually building something that matters. He is building a massive empire. Her words were laced with the same casual cruelty she always used. Ever since Marcus married her, Lauren had made it her personal mission to remind me of my place. She loved dropping these subtle, venomous hints that I was just another stereotype. A poor, uneducated, struggling single black woman who could not keep her life together. Meanwhile, Marcus was the brilliant tech entrepreneur, the golden boy who was going to elevate the family name. It was a convenient narrative they sold to their wealthy country club friends. But it was a complete and utter lie built on stolen money. Marcus is certainly not building an empire, I replied, staring directly into her cold blue eyes. Marcus is running a completely failing software company that burns through cash faster than he can print it. The only reason his business is still afloat is because my mother keeps quietly bailing him out to protect her precious social standing. Lauren laughed, a high grating sound that echoed off the sterile hospital walls. You are just jealous, she sneered. You are jealous because Marcus is meeting with the executive board of Apex Medical tonight. They are going to acquire his firm for millions. I felt a strange, icy sensation wash over me. Apex Medical Corporation. The name hung in the air between us, heavy with an irony she could not possibly understand. They are hosting a massive, extravagant gala tonight in Buckhead. Lauren continued, oblivious to my reaction. All the top investors will be there. Marcus needs to show them that his company has strong financial backing. If you sign that paper, the trust fund money transfers to his business account immediately. It proves he has liquid assets. It makes the acquisition look flawless. We need this deal to go through without complications. And if I refuse, I asked, picking up the manila folder and holding it very firmly in my hands. Lauren took a step closer, the sweet smell of her expensive perfume clashing sickeningly with the scent of rubbing alcohol in the room. If you refuse, she said, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper, Beatrice is going to cut you off entirely. She will make sure you never see a dime of that money anyway. She has expensive lawyers who can tie that trust up in probate court for decades. You will drown in these hospital bills all by yourself. She pointed a manicured finger at the brightly flashing monitors surrounding Zuri's bed. You cannot afford this, Kendra. We know you cannot. You drive a used car. You wear clothes from discount stores. You have absolutely no leverage here. Just sign the document, give Marcus the money he needs to close the Apex deal, and maybe your mother will feel generous enough to pay off your medical debt. Do not be stupid. Do not ruin this for Marcus just because your own life is a miserable failure. Be a good sister for once and do exactly what you are told. I looked down at my sleeping daughter. Zuri looked so tiny in the center of that massive cold hospital bed, her chest rising and falling in a steady, reassuring rhythm. The surgeons had performed a miracle today. She was going to live. That was the only thing that mattered. The fear that had been gripping my beating heart for the past 48 hours suddenly evaporated, replaced by a searing, undeniable clarity. I had spent years letting my family step all over me to keep the peace. I had hidden my true life from them to avoid their constant toxic demands. I looked back at Lauren. She was standing with her hands on her hips, waiting for me to break. She expected me to cry. She expected me to beg. She expected me to reach for that gold pen and sign away my grandfather's legacy to fund my brother's fraudulent lifestyle. Instead, I slowly opened the manila folder. I pulled out the heavy, thick stack of legal documents. I gripped the top of the pages, looked Lauren right in her eyes, and smiled. You want me to be a good sister? I asked quietly. Watch closely while I handle it entirely. With one deliberate motion, I ripped the thick legal parchment in half. I stacked the halves and tore them again, reducing my grandfather's trust release forms into worthless confetti. I did not break eye contact with my sister-in-law as I dropped the shredded pieces into the red biohazard bin beside Zuri's bed. Lauren let out a sharp gasp, stumbling backward as if I had physically struck her. Her eyes grew wide with shock and rising rage. She looked down at the biohazard bin, her hands trembling so violently that her iced matcha latte spilled over the plastic lid, dripping onto her pristine white Chanel blazer. Are you completely insane? Lauren shrieked. Do you have any idea what you just did, you bitter little woman? Marcus's company is on the edge of bankruptcy. We needed that money today. I suggest you lower your voice in my daughter's intensive care unit, I said. I closed the distance between us, forcing her to take a step back. You and Marcus have leeched off this family for a decade. You want to impress your corporate investors tonight. Good luck doing it without my signature to bail him out of his financial incompetence. Lauren's face flushed a violent shade of red. You do not understand anything about business, Kendra. You never have. Marcus is hosting a massive gala tonight at the St. Regis Hotel in Buckhead. We invited the senior executive board of Apex Medical. They are looking to acquire his software firm for $30 million, but they require proof of liquid assets before they sign the merger documents. I crossed my arms watching her unravel. And Marcus lied to them. He told them he had capital he does not possess. It is called leverage. Lauren snapped violently, wiping the spilled drink from her sleeve. Something a glorified data entry clerk could never comprehend. Marcus built a tech empire and you are trying to sabotage him because you are suffocating in your jealousy. Beatrice was right about you. You have always been the dark cloud hanging over this family's reputation. I let out a humorless laugh. My mother cares about nothing but her image at her Jack and Jill meetings. She spent years telling her high society friends that I moved overseas because she was too ashamed to admit her daughter was a single mother fighting to keep her child alive. And Marcus, he did not build an empire. He built a house of cards using money Beatrice stole from my college tuition to fund his failed startups. You are pathetic. Lauren spat, her lip curling in absolute disgust. You want to talk about the past because your present is a miserable joke. Look at you. Look at this pathetic hospital room. You have nothing. Marcus is going to be a multi-millionaire by midnight, and you just destroyed your last chance to ride his coattails. She shoved her gold pen back into her designer tote bag. I am leaving. But you need to understand exactly what is going to happen to you now, Kendra. When Marcus closes this deal with Apex Medical tonight, Beatrice is cutting you out of the family entirely. You will be formally disowned. You will not get a single dime of the inheritance, and you will never be welcome at another family event. Do not ever contact us again. Make sure you tell Marcus to check his financial algorithms before he presents them to the Apex board. I replied, my voice chillingly calm. I would hate for him to embarrass himself in front of such an elusive, powerful corporation. Lauren let out a final scoffing laugh. You do not know the first thing about Apex Medical. You are nothing but socially unfit trash. She spun on her heel, her designer boots clicking furiously against the linoleum floor as she stormed out of the intensive care unit, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and toxic energy in her wake. I stood perfectly still, listening to her heavy footsteps fade down the long hospital corridor. A profound, icy calm washed over my body. Lauren thought Marcus was going to close a massive deal with Apex Medical tonight. She genuinely believed my mother was paying for that lavish gala at the St. Regis to secure his future. They had absolutely no idea who they were actually dealing with or the sheer magnitude of the trap they had just walked into. I turned away from the door and looked at the head nurse. She had been sitting quietly in the corner of the room the entire time, expertly adjusting Zuri's intravenous drip and pretending not to hear the vicious family drama that had just unfolded. Mrs. Higgins, I asked softly, walking back to the side of the bed and gently stroking my daughter's forehead. Is she completely stable? She is sleeping very soundly, honey. The older woman smiled gently, her warm brown eyes full of profound understanding and quiet strength. The anesthesia will keep her resting comfortably. She will not wake up for at least another 4 hours. You go do exactly what you need to do. I will sit right here, and I will not leave her side for a single second. Thank you, I said. I reached over to the visitor's chair and grabbed my dark trench coat. I slipped it on over my faded jeans and simple black turtleneck. I slid my feet into a pair of scuffed boots. I looked exactly like the struggling single mother they had spent years telling everyone I was. It was the perfect disguise for the absolute destruction I was about to unleash. I have a highly exclusive family event to attend, I told the nurse, grabbing my car keys from the bedside table. I took one last loving look at my beautiful daughter, promising her silently that our lives were about to change forever. Then I walked out of the hospital, ready to burn their perfectly curated high society facade straight to the ground. The sliding doors of the hospital lobby parted, hitting me with the thick air of the Atlanta evening. I walked toward the parking garage, my boot heels striking the concrete with unforgiving precision. My hands were steady. For the first time in 34 years, the crushing weight of my family's relentless expectations had vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp, blinding clarity. They had underestimated the phantom daughter. They assumed my silence was a symptom of defeat, a quiet surrender to my mother's brutal social engineering. They were about to learn that my silence had actually been an incubation period. I slipped into the driver's seat of my reliable sedan, the car Lauren had mocked just minutes prior. Turning the ignition, the engine purred to life, a quiet contrast to the storm of vengeance brewing in my chest. I pulled out of the hospital complex and merged onto the highway, heading straight for the opulent heart of Buckhead. As the medical buildings faded in my rearview mirror, the city skyline stretched out before me, glittering with the corporate wealth my brother desperately pretended to possess. Marcus had always been a master of illusions. My mother Beatrice was the grand architect of those illusions. I gripped the steering wheel, my mind drifting to the precise moment I realized I had been entirely erased from our family lineage. 3 years ago, a prominent local magazine featured our family in a sprawling 2-page spread. The glossy photograph showed Beatrice resplendent in a custom emerald gown, standing proudly next to Marcus and Lauren. The caption detailed the generational success of the Washington family, praising Beatrice for raising such a brilliant visionary son. At the very end of the article, a single sentence stood out, burning itself into my memory forever. It described Beatrice as the devoted mother of her only child, Marcus. Her only child. She looked a journalist in the eyes and successfully wiped me from existence, all because my reality did not align with her country club aspirations. I was a single mother who abandoned a prestigious law degree to care for a child born with a congenital heart defect. In Beatrice's meticulously curated world, Zuri and I were unsightly blemishes on an otherwise flawless canvas. We were liabilities. So she excised us, redirecting every ounce of the family's resources, influence, and grandfather's initial inheritance to prop up Marcus's failing tech ventures. She funded his fraudulent lifestyle, allowing him to lease luxury cars and throw extravagant parties to bait clueless investors. Meanwhile, I spent my nights sitting beside a hospital crib teaching myself advanced medical software coding on a refurbished laptop while Zuri slept. That painful exclusion was the greatest gift Beatrice ever gave me. Operating completely in the shadows, unbothered by social obligations or family scrutiny, I built my empire. I created a predictive artificial intelligence system for pediatric cardiology, inspired by my fight to keep my daughter alive. When I sold the initial patent licensing to a federal health agency for $80 million, my name was buried under corporate non-disclosure agreements. When I used that capital to launch Apex Medical, expanding it into an industry titan, I remained the unseen founder. My family was so consumed by their own vanity and superficial networking that they never bothered to look at the actual names behind the venture capital firms they courted. The glowing, majestic facade of the St. Regis Hotel loomed ahead, interrupting my thoughts and pulling me back to the present reality. The driveway was a chaotic, glittering parade of valets rushing to open the doors of arriving Bentleys, Maybachs, and pristine black SUVs. The air outside the venue was thick with the scent of expensive cologne, blooming hydrangeas, and the suffocating desperation of social climbing. I pulled my unassuming sedan directly into the main valet lane, pulling up right behind a gleaming Rolls-Royce. The young valet attendant quickly approached my window, his eyes darting skeptically over my dusty hood and faded paint job. "Excuse me, ma'am," the valet said, leaning down with a polite but firm smile. "This lane is reserved for the Washington Apex Corporate Gala. General hotel parking is around the back of the building." "I am here for the Washington Gala," I replied, placing the vehicle in park and handing him my keys. I stepped out of the car, adjusting the belt of my dark, structured trench coat over my black turtleneck and faded denim jeans. The valet stared at my outfit, bewildered by my lack of formal evening wear, but took the keys without protest. I walked up the red-carpeted stairs toward the hotel entrance. Massive floral arrangements flanked the heavy glass doors, adorned with gold ribbons and oversized signs celebrating the impending merger between Marcus's crumbling software firm and Apex Medical. They had pulled out all the stop spending money. They absolutely did not have to stage a performance of wealth. The sheer audacity of their recklessness was staggering. My mother had likely drained her last line of credit to pay for the centerpieces, fully believing my signature would bail them out by midnight. The rhythmic thumping bass line of a live jazz band spilled out from the grand foyer as I approached the entrance. Flashing lights from event photographers illuminated the faces of Atlanta's elite, mingling near the coat check. I stood outside the glass doors for a brief moment, taking a deep breath of the cool night air. I was not walking into that room as the discarded scapegoat. I was not the struggling daughter begging for a seat at their table. I was the absolute apex predator stepping into a trap of their own making. I pushed the heavy glass doors wide open, the buzzing atmosphere of the gala rushing over me. I stepped onto the polished marble floor, ignoring the shocked, highly judgmental stares of the formally dressed guests around me. I walked straight toward the massive main ballroom, entirely ready to initiate the total destruction of their fraudulent empire. The foyer of the St. Regis Hotel was a masterclass in aggressive extravagance. Towering crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the imported Italian marble, reflecting off the diamond necklaces and silk evening gowns of Atlanta's most elite socialites. Waiters in crisp white tuxedos glided through the crowd, balancing silver trays loaded with champagne flutes and caviar hors d'oeuvres. The air was thick with the scent of expensive floral arrangements and the low, murmuring hum of wealthy people discussing their investment portfolios. I moved through this sea of curated perfection like a ghost haunting a palace. My scuffed leather boots clicked against the floor, a sharp, dissonant sound that cut through the soft jazz playing from a live band in the corner. I kept my hands buried deep in the pockets of my dark trench coat, my faded denim jeans standing in stark, unapologetic contrast to the sea of designer labels surrounding me. People stared. Of course, they stared. In this ecosystem of wealth and status, a woman dressed for a late-night grocery run was an anomaly that demanded immediate scrutiny. Women draped in couture paused their conversations, their perfectly manicured hands flying to their mouths as they whispered to their husbands. I ignored their judgmental glares, keeping my eyes locked on the grand mahogany doors of the main ballroom just 50 feet ahead. I only needed to make it through those doors to find Marcus and the Apex medical executives. I did not even make it halfway across the foyer. A manicured hand suddenly clamped down on my right bicep with the crushing force of a vice grip. Long acrylic nails dug painfully through the thick fabric of my trench coat. I was violently yanked backward, my boots skidding against the polished marble floor. "What in the name of God do you think you are doing here?" a voice hissed directly into my ear. I turned my head. My mother Beatrice stood glaring at me, her chest heaving with absolute unfiltered revulsion. She was draped in a breathtaking emerald green silk gown, her signature string of South Sea pearls gleaming under the chandelier light. Her hair was styled into a flawless, intricate updo, and her makeup was applied with the precision of a woman who viewed her physical appearance as a weapon. Right now, however, that flawless facade was contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. "Let go of my arm, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously calm, completely unaffected by her aggressive posturing. "You look like you just crawled out of a homeless shelter." Beatrice spat, her eyes darting frantically around the foyer to see if any of her prestigious country club friends had noticed us. She tightened her grip on my arm, her manicured nails digging even deeper. "Are you completely out of your mind? I explicitly told Lauren to handle you at the hospital. Why are you parading around the St. Regis looking like a peasant? Get out of here before Marcus's investors see you and you ruin everything." "Zuri survived the surgery, Mom," I said, staring directly into her cold, panicked eyes, refusing to let her change the subject. "In case you were wondering, the pediatric surgeon said another hour, and her heart would have given out completely. She is in the recovery wing right now." My mother let out a frustrated, dismissive sigh, completely ignoring the news about her own granddaughter crossing the threshold of death. She physically tried to drag me behind a massive, towering arrangement of white hydrangeas, desperate to hide my faded jeans from the prying eyes of Atlanta's high society. "I do not have time for your endless melodramatics right now, Kendra," she sneered, her voice dropping to a harsh, venomous whisper. "Marcus is inside that ballroom right now, preparing to meet the senior executive board of Apex Medical. This is the most important night of his entire life. If he does not get this multi-million-dollar buyout, his firm goes completely under. Do you have any idea how deeply humiliating it would be for me if my only son went bankrupt? I have a reputation to uphold in this city. My Jack and Jill associates would absolutely crucify me if they found out the truth about his crumbling finances. A reputation built on a foundation of absolute lies, Mom," I replied effortlessly, twisting my arm and breaking her aggressive grip. I smoothed out the sleeve of my trench coat, maintaining my icy composure. "Just like Marcus's entire tech firm, you care more about your standing with the country club committee than you care about your own granddaughter fighting for her life in a hospital bed." "Do not you dare lecture me about family loyalty," Beatrice hissed, pointing a trembling finger at my chest. "You are an embarrassment, Kendra. You always have been. You dropped out of a top-tier law program to play house, and now you are a struggling, broke single mother who cannot even afford a decent outfit to wear in public. You bring nothing but shame to the Washington name. I have spent years covering up your failures, telling my friends you were working overseas, just so I would not have to admit my daughter is a massive disappointment." "You did not cover up my failures," I countered, my voice echoing slightly in the alcove. "You erased my existence so you could prop Marcus up as the genius golden child of the family. You drained my college savings to fund his fraudulent lifestyle. You sacrificed me at the altar of your own vanity." Beatrice's face flushed a violent, angry red. She looked around frantically, realizing that our argument was beginning to attract the attention of passing waiters and curious guests. Her desperation reached a boiling point. She turned toward the coat check counter and waved her hand aggressively at a broad-shouldered man wearing a dark suit. "Security," my mother snapped. "Remove this woman from the premises immediately. She is trespassing now." The security guard stepped from the coat check counter, his hand resting on his radio. He wore the rigid expression of a man accustomed to trespassers, and my faded jeans painted me as exactly that. My mother stepped back, crossing her arms with a look of triumphant vindication. She believed throwing me out would solve her immediate problems and preserve her social standing. I stood my ground, my hands relaxed inside my dark trench coat. I was prepared to let the guard escort me out, knowing it would amplify the impending disaster. Before the security guard could grab my shoulder, a panicked voice cut through the murmuring crowd. Marcus came storming out of the main ballroom, pushing past a group of startled guests. My golden child brother was dressed in a pristine, custom-tailored black tuxedo that probably cost more than the average American makes in a month. However, the immaculate tailoring could not hide the unadulterated terror radiating from his every movement. A thin sheen of nervous sweat glistened on his forehead under the bright crystal chandeliers. He grabbed the security guard by the elbow, halting the man in his tracks, and then turned his furious gaze directly onto me. "What in the name of God are you doing here, Kendra?" Marcus hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of absolute rage and desperate panic. He stepped squarely in front of me, using his tall frame to block the view of the ballroom doors from my line of sight. "I thought Lauren made it abundantly clear at the hospital that your presence is neither required nor desired tonight." "I am here to attend a business function, Marcus," I replied, keeping my tone entirely conversational and devoid of any emotional reaction. "And your wife does not dictate where I go or what I do. My daughter just survived a 9-hour open-heart surgery, and instead of asking if your niece is alive, you are hyperventilating over a party." Marcus let out a harsh, bitter laugh, running a frantic hand over his perfectly styled hair. "Do not try to guilt-trip me with your domestic struggles right now. You threw away your law degree to play single mother, and now you scrape by doing freelance tech support from a cramped apartment. That was your choice, Kendra. You do not get to drag your pathetic, depressing reality into my world. This is the St. Regis. This is an exclusive, high-level corporate engagement, not a charity shelter." My mother stepped up right beside him. "I already told her to leave, Marcus. She is completely unhinged. She is trying to ruin your big night just out of pure, spiteful jealousy. Let the security guard do his job and throw her out." "I am handling it, Mom," Marcus snapped, though his eyes kept darting nervously back toward the heavy mahogany doors. He leaned in closer to me, his voice dropping to a vicious, threatening register. "Listen to me very carefully, Kendra. I am sitting in a private VIP dining room right this very second with the senior executive board of Apex Medical. They flew into Atlanta specifically to meet with me. I am about to secure a $30 million buyout for my software firm. I am about to become a multimillionaire." I maintained unblinking eye contact with him, allowing a slow, cold smile to form on my face. "Are you absolutely certain they are going to hand you $30 million, Marcus? Because from the industry rumors, I hear your proprietary software is severely outdated, your code is a complete disaster, and your financial records are built on fraudulent projections." The color drained instantly from Marcus's face, leaving him looking sickly and pale under the golden lighting. For a fraction of a second, the arrogant tech entrepreneur facade slipped, revealing the terrified bankrupt fraud hiding underneath. He swallowed hard. "You have absolutely no idea what you are talking about." Marcus stammered, his voice suddenly lacking its previous commanding volume. "You fix broken laptops for small businesses. You do not know the first thing about corporate acquisitions or venture capital. Apex Medical is highly interested in my infrastructure. Apex Medical is interested in verifying the truth." I corrected him smoothly, stepping half a pace forward to reclaim my physical space. "And the truth is that you have not secured a single legitimate contract in over 2 years. You have been running a glorified Ponzi scheme using Mom to steal from my college funds and leverage the family estate just so you can lease exotic cars and pretend you belong in this ballroom." "Shut your mouth!" Marcus yelled, momentarily forgetting where he was. Several wealthy guests standing near the coat check turned their heads, their eyes wide with scandalous curiosity. Marcus realized his mistake immediately and lowered his voice, his chest heaving with suppressed fury. "You are insane. You are making up desperate lies because you cannot stand the fact that I am successful and you are a complete failure. You are nothing to this family, Kendra." I tilted my head, studying him with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a dying specimen under a microscope. If I am such an irrelevant failure, Marcus, then why are you shaking? I was visibly trembling now, the sleeves of his expensive tuxedo vibrating as his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. He knew he was standing on the absolute brink of total financial ruin. He knew his company was a hollow shell, and he was desperately banking on this one miraculous merger to save him from federal indictments and total bankruptcy. He thought he could manipulate a massive corporation. I am done wasting my valuable time on you, Kendra. Marcus spat, trying to regain his dominant posture. He turned away from me, motioning aggressively for the security guard to step forward again. I have a $30 million contract waiting for my signature in the very next room right this very second. The heavy hand of the hotel security guard hovered just inches from my shoulder. Before he could make any physical contact, the sharp, rhythmic clicking of designer heels cut through the tense, suffocating atmosphere of the foyer. Lauren pushed her way through the gathering crowd of onlookers, a fresh glass of expensive champagne balanced delicately in her manicured hand. She stepped up beside Marcus, looping her arm through his with an exaggerated display of spousal solidarity. When she locked eyes with me, a cruel, delighted smirk spread across her perfectly contoured face. I cannot believe my eyes. Lauren laughed, her voice carrying loudly toward the nearby socialites. I told Beatrice you would show up begging for handouts. You had the audacity to crash a private gala dressed like you are scrubbing floors. Did you take a bus to Buckhead, Kendra? They usually do not let people like you past the front gate. Lauren, do not engage with her. Marcus snapped his eyes, darting toward the heavy mahogany doors of the VIP dining room. He wiped another bead of sweat from his brow, his pristine tuxedo suddenly looking suffocatingly tight on his rigid frame. She is trying to stall. She knows what is at stake and she wants to ruin my life out of jealousy. I need her gone before David Vance walks out. Oh, she is definitely leaving, Lauren sneered, taking a slow, arrogant sip of her champagne. She looked me up and down with unfiltered revulsion, her gaze lingering on my scuffed boots and faded denim jeans. You are completely unhinged, Kendra. You ripped up your last chance at financial survival in that depressing little hospital room, and now you have stalked us all the way to Atlanta's most exclusive venue. You really thought you could just walk in here and sabotage Marcus. You are nothing but a pathetic, socially unfit embarrassment to this entire family. I stood perfectly still, my hands resting casually inside the deep pockets of my dark trench coat. The sheer, blinding arrogance radiating from my brother and his wife was almost intoxicating to witness. They were so thoroughly convinced of their own fabricated superiority that they could not perceive the massive, catastrophic trap they had willingly walked into. I did not flinch, and I did not break eye contact. I am not here to sabotage anything, Lauren, I said, my voice dropping to a smooth, chillingly calm register that sliced through their frantic energy. I am simply here to ensure that all corporate negotiations are conducted with absolute, uncompromising transparency. Investors deserve to know exactly who they are giving their $30 million to. Marcus let out a guttural sound of pure panic. He completely abandoned his carefully cultivated billionaire persona, turning to the bewildered security guard with frantic, aggressive gestures. What are you waiting for? Marcus yelled, pointing a shaking finger directly at my chest. I am a key sponsor of this entire event. My mother rented this ballroom. This woman is a trespasser. She is mentally unstable, and she is actively harassing my wife and me. Grab her by the arms and drag her out the service exit right this very second. The security guard, a burly man who looked increasingly uncomfortable with the escalating family drama, took a hesitant step toward me. He reached out his hands, preparing to physically remove me from the luxurious foyer. The wealthy guests surrounding us gasped, taking collective steps backward, their diamond necklaces catching the light as they eagerly watched the impending physical altercation unfold. You are going to look so incredibly pathetic when they throw you out onto the street. Lauren laughed, her eyes gleaming with malicious joy. Make sure you use the service elevator, Kendra. We would hate for you to track mud onto the main lobby carpets. And do not even think about calling us when the hospital bills for your sick daughter finally push you into total bankruptcy. We are entirely done with you. Take her out, Marcus demanded again, his voice cracking with desperation. He stepped closer to the guard, aggressively invading the man's personal space. If you do not remove this trash from my gala right now, I will personally see to it that the hotel manager fires you before midnight. I have highly important executives waiting for me in that room. I did not resist as the security guard finally placed his heavy, calloused hand on my left shoulder. I did not pull away, and I did not raise my voice. I simply stood there, a solitary figure of absolute calm, amidst the swirling hurricane of their desperate, pathetic illusions. Marcus let out a heavy sigh of profound relief, adjusting the lapels of his tuxedo as he prepared to return to his fraudulent empire. Lauren took another triumphant sip of her champagne, her smirk widening as she watched the guard begin to turn me toward the back hallway. They genuinely believed they had won. They truly thought they had successfully silenced the phantom daughter one final time. But as the security guard applied pressure to my shoulder, preparing to forcefully march me away from the glittering ballroom, a sudden heavy silence fell over the immediate area. The murmuring voices of the wealthy onlookers abruptly stopped. Marcus froze in his tracks, his eyes locking onto something situated directly behind me. The arrogant smirk on Lauren's face instantly dissolved into a mask of total confusion. I did not need to turn around to know what had just happened. I could hear the sharp, definitive click of the heavy mahogany doors unlatching. The VIP dining room had opened. The loud, vibrant music drifting from the jazz band seemed to fade into a muted hum. The crystal chandeliers above us suddenly felt overly bright, casting long, dramatic shadows across the imported Italian marble floor. The true power brokers of the evening were finally stepping out into the open. The heavy mahogany doors swung outward with a muted, expensive thud. 4 figures emerged from the VIP dining room. At the forefront was David Vance, the chief operating officer of Apex Medical. He was a towering, silver-haired man in a bespoke charcoal suit. He did not walk so much as he commanded the space around him, his sharp, calculating eyes immediately scanning the chaotic scene unfolding near the coat check. The burly security guard, who had been seconds away from dragging me toward the service exit, instantly dropped his hand from my shoulder. He took a hasty step backward, recognizing the sudden shift in the room's atmospheric pressure. Marcus underwent a physical transformation so rapid and pathetic, it was almost difficult to watch. The violent bulging veins on his neck vanished. His aggressive, wide-stanced posture collapsed inward. He smoothed his hands down the lapels of his tuxedo, pasting a wide, desperate, and sickeningly eager smile across his sweating face. He lunged forward deliberately, positioning his body to block me from David's line of sight, acting as a human shield against his own fabricated embarrassment. "Mr. Vance," Marcus practically sang, his voice pitching up a full octave in his desperation to please. "I am so incredibly sorry that you had to step out here. Please, I beg you to ignore this minor disruption. We are handling it immediately." Marcus gestured wildly toward the security guard, his eyes wide with frantic begging intensity. He was sweating so profusely now that a drop rolled down his temple. "This woman is just an uninvited, mentally unstable trespasser who slipped past the front desk." Marcus continued, his words tumbling out in a rapid, breathless stream. "She has no business being at the St. Regis. My security team is escorting her out the back door right this very second. Please, David, let us go back inside the private suite. We have the $30 million merger documents laid out on the table. I am completely ready to sign. We should not let this street trash interrupt our historic partnership." Lauren quickly flanked her husband, nodding enthusiastically. "It is just a little local riffraff, Mr. Vance," Lauren chimed in, her voice dripping with syrupy fake Southern charm. "You know how these downtown hotels can be sometimes. The staff will have the lobby cleared of this nuisance in less than a minute." I remained standing exactly where I was, my hands resting calmly in the deep pockets of my dark trench coat. I did not attempt to peek around Marcus's broad shoulders. I simply watched the panicked tension radiating from the back of his neck. Marcus had spent his entire adult life crafting a fraudulent persona of the untouchable, brilliant tech visionary, and he was currently watching that illusion crack under the weight of my presence. David Vance did not say a single word in response to my brother's frantic groveling. He did not acknowledge Lauren's offer of champagne. He did not even look at Marcus's outstretched, desperate, shaking hand. The chief operating officer of Apex Medical bypassed Marcus completely. It was a masterful, devastating display of corporate dismissal. David stepped smoothly around my brother's blocking stance, treating Marcus like an inconvenient piece of furniture rather than a $30 million acquisition target. The three executive board members flanked David, mirroring his exact movements, their faces locked in expressions of stern, unreadable professionalism. Marcus stumbled sideways, his mouth hanging open in sheer confusion, as David closed the remaining distance between us. The jazz band in the corner had stopped playing the musicians, sensing the intense, dangerous shift in the room's dynamic. David stopped exactly 2 feet in front of me. He ignored my scuffed boots. He ignored my faded denim jeans. He ignored the stark, glaring contrast between my casual attire and the sea of silk and diamonds surrounding us. He looked directly into my eyes, and the stern, intimidating executive mask he wore instantly dissolved. David offered a slight formal and deeply respectful bow, dipping his head toward me in front of the entire glittering foyer. "Ms. Washington," David said, his deep, resonant voice carrying clearly across the silent marble floor. "We honestly did not expect you to attend tonight's engagement. Is everything all right with your daughter?" "Zuri is currently in the pediatric recovery wing, David. The surgery was extremely difficult, but she pulled through. Thank you for asking about her well-being." David let out a visible sigh of relief, his shoulders dropping slightly. "That is outstanding news. We would have happily rescheduled this Atlanta trip if you had requested it. Family always comes first." Behind David, Marcus let out a strangled, pathetic wheezing sound. It was the noise of a man watching his entire universe crumble into dust. He took a shaky, uncoordinated step forward, his polished dress shoes slipping slightly on the marble. "Ms. Washington," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking, sounding like a confused little boy rather than a ruthless corporate titan. He stared at David, then at me, then back at David. His hands shook violently. "David, what are you doing? Why are you calling my sister Ms. Washington with such respect? She is a freelance administrative assistant. She fixes laptops." David Vance turned his head slowly, looking at Marcus, with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. The executive pity in his eyes was devastating. "Marcus," David asked, his voice sharp and unyielding, "Kendra Washington is the founder, sole owner, and chief executive officer of Apex Medical. She is the one evaluating your company for acquisition." The absolute paralyzing silence that washed over the St. Regis foyer was thick enough to choke on. You could hear the faint, distant hum of the hotel air conditioning system. You could hear the sharp, staggered intake of breath from my mother, Beatrice, who had been hiding near the floral arrangements. She gripped the edge of a tall cocktail table, her knuckles turning bone white, as the reality of David's statement collided with her meticulously crafted lies. Marcus took a stumbling, uncoordinated step backward. His polished dress shoes slipped slightly on the marble floor. He looked like a man who had just been told the sky was falling and the earth was cracking open simultaneously. He stared at David, then turned his frantic, bloodshot eyes toward me. His mouth opened and closed repeatedly, gasping for air like a fish thrown onto a dry deck. He could not comprehend the words. His brain simply refused to process the information. "That is not a funny joke, David," Marcus finally stammered, his voice cracking into a high, pathetic squeak. "My sister fixes broken keyboards. She lives in a rundown apartment. She does not even have a proper savings account. You must have her confused with someone else. Apex Medical is a massive billion-dollar global corporation. You are telling me the founder of that company is standing right here in a dirty coat?" David did not smile. He did not offer any comfort. He simply reached into the breast pocket of his tailored suit and pulled out a heavy embossed business card. He held it out, forcing Marcus to take it with trembling fingers. I watched my brother look down at the card. I knew exactly what it said. It bore the unmistakable golden crest of Apex Medical, and right below it my name was printed in bold, uncompromising lettering: Kendra Washington, Chief Executive Officer and Founder. "There is no confusion, Marcus," David said, his tone devoid of any corporate politeness. "Ms. Washington built the predictive pediatric cardiology software that serves as the entire foundation of our company. She sold the initial licensing to the federal government and used the capital to launch Apex. We have been operating under strict non-disclosure agreements for 3 years at her specific request to maintain her privacy. When your firm submitted a merger proposal to our acquisitions department last month, we flagged it immediately. She personally instructed me to fly down to Atlanta tonight. Not to sign merger documents, but to deliver our final evaluation of your software company in person. Marcus dropped the business card. It fluttered to the marble floor, landing right next to my scuffed boots. He looked at me, sheer, unadulterated terror radiating from his sweating face. The arrogant tech entrepreneur persona had completely evaporated. He was nothing more than a terrified fraud staring at the architect of his own destruction. Lauren, who had been standing frozen just a few feet away, suddenly let out a strangled gasp. The expensive crystal champagne flute slipped from her manicured fingers. It hit the marble floor and shattered violently, sending shards of glass and expensive alcohol splashing across her designer heels. She did not even flinch. She just stared at me, her chest heaving with rapid, shallow breaths. "You are a billionaire," Lauren whispered, her voice barely audible over the sudden, frantic murmurs of the wealthy guests who had been eavesdropping on our conversation. "You have been a billionaire this entire time while I was paying for your coffee, while I was telling my friends you were a charity case." I finally took my hands out of the pockets of my dark trench coat. I took one deliberate step forward, closing the distance between me and my brother's terrified wife. "I live far below my means, Lauren," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the foyer. "I do not wear my bank account on my wrist like a desperate badge of honor. I put every single dollar I made over the last 7 years into building a medical technology empire. I built a system that predicts congenital heart failures. A system that literally just saved my own daughter's life today. While you and Marcus were leasing sports cars you could not afford and begging my mother to drain her retirement funds to pay for your country club memberships, I was securing government contracts." I slowly turned my attention back to Marcus, who was now visibly shaking his knees, looking like they were about to give out completely. "You thought I showed up tonight to beg you for a handout, Marcus. You thought I needed your pathetic trust fund money to pay my hospital bills. You never stopped to ask yourself why a massive billion-dollar corporation would suddenly take an interest in a failing, debt-ridden software firm that has not released a successful product in 2 years. Beatrice finally broke her paralyzed stance. She practically shoved her way past a group of stunned socialites, abandoning all her precious country club etiquette. She rushed toward me, her emerald silk gown swishing loudly against the floor. The look of pure disgust she had worn just 10 minutes ago had completely vanished. It was instantly replaced by a desperate, syrupy, and sickeningly fake display of motherly affection. "Kendra!" My mother gasped, her eyes wide with frantic, calculating greed. She reached out both of her hands, attempting to grab my arms in a loving embrace. "My beautiful, brilliant girl, I cannot believe this. Why did you not tell us? We would have thrown you a massive celebration. We are family, Kendra. Kendra, this is the most incredible news. The Washington family has finally reached the absolute top." I physically recoiled, taking a step backward, as if her hands were coated in acid. The sheer audacity of her sudden pivot was breathtaking. "Do not touch me, Mom," I said, my voice cracking like a whip. "You told me to stop making my dying daughter our problem. Your narrative ends tonight." The sharp rejection hung in the air of the St. Regis foyer. Beatrice froze, her outstretched hands hovering awkwardly in the empty space between us. For a fleeting second, the polished mask of the untouchable Atlanta matriarch slipped, revealing the terrified, opportunistic woman underneath. She quickly lowered her hands, smoothing the front of her expensive emerald gown in a frantic attempt to regain her composure. The surrounding crowd of wealthy socialites, investment bankers, and country club board members watched her every move with unblinking predatory interest. Gossip was the absolute lifeblood of this city, and Beatrice was currently serving them a masterclass in public humiliation. "Kendra, sweetheart, you are clearly overwhelmed," Beatrice stammered, forcing a shrill, unnatural laugh that echoed terribly against the marble walls. She turned her head slightly, offering a desperate, pleading smile to David Vance and the other Apex medical executives. My daughter has always been incredibly theatrical. We have a very complex, deeply loving dynamic. She is just exhausted from the hospital. Zuri's surgery has taken a massive toll on all of us. I have been practically sick with worry all day long. You were drinking champagne and threatening to have me thrown out the service exit exactly 5 minutes ago. I replied, my voice projecting with crystal clear authority. Do not weaponize my daughter's heart condition to save your fragile reputation. You told your Jack and Jill committee that I was an unwed burden. You told your charity board that I was a massive disappointment. You willingly sacrificed my entire existence to maintain the illusion that your son was a technological genius. Marcus let out a strangled whimper. He took a stumbling step forward, shoving past his mother. His custom-tailored tuxedo, which had looked immaculate just half an hour ago, now hung on his frame like a cheap, ill-fitting costume. Heavy perspiration on his forehead was ruining his meticulously styled hair. He looked completely broken, stripped of the arrogant bravado he had wielded like a weapon since childhood. "Kendra, please!" Marcus begged, his voice trembling so violently he could barely form the words. He clasped his hands together in front of his chest, practically praying to me. "You have to listen to reason. This is a misunderstanding. We are family. You cannot do this to me in front of David. You are the chief executive officer of Apex. You have the absolute power to authorize this buyout right now. You can approve the $30 million acquisition and save my company tonight." David Vance took a slow, deliberate step backward, formally yielding the entire floor to me. He crossed his arms over his chest, his sharp eyes locked onto Marcus with an expression of profound, unfiltered disgust. The other board members mirrored his silent judgment. They were witnessing the utter destruction of a fraudulent corporate facade, and they were letting me wield the hammer. "Save your company?" I asked, tilting my head as I studied the desperate man standing before me. "Why on earth would a highly successful tech visionary need saving, Marcus? You have spent 5 years boasting about your massive profit margins. You hosted lavish yacht parties, leased luxury imported vehicles, and paraded Lauren around Buckhead like royalty. You told everyone in this room that you were building an unstoppable empire." Lauren flinched at the sound of her name. She was standing near the shattered remains of her champagne flute, her designer heels surrounded by sharp, glittering fragments of glass. The arrogant smirk she had worn in the intensive care unit was entirely gone, replaced by a hollow, terrified stare. She looked back and forth between her groveling husband and the woman she had mercilessly bullied for years. The mathematical reality of her situation was finally crashing down upon her. "It was all about optics, Kendra." Marcus pleaded, his eyes wide and bloodshot. He took another shaky step forward, desperate to close the distance between us. "You understand business. You understand the game. You have to project success to attract serious capital. I had to look the part so these investors would take me seriously. But the software is solid. The infrastructure is there. If Apex acquires us tonight, I can finalize the coding. I can make the company exactly what I promised everyone it was. Just sign the authorization, Kendra. I am begging you. Do not let your own brother drown." Beatrice rushed forward again, stepping right beside Marcus. She completely dropped the fake syrupy affection, switching to a tactic of urgent whispered manipulation. "Think about the family," my mother hissed, her eyes darting nervously toward the watching crowd. "If Marcus goes under, it ruins the Washington name forever. You have your billions. You have your secret little empire. You do not need this merger money, but he does. Give him the contract. If you do this for us, I will publicly announce you as my greatest pride and joy. I will give you the respect you have always wanted." "I do not want your respect, Beatrice," I said, my voice dropping to a low, deadly register that silenced her instantly. "I stopped seeking your approval the day you handed my college tuition check to Marcus to fund his first failed startup. You bet on the wrong child, and now you are begging the dark horse to pay out your gambling debts." I slowly reached into the deep right pocket of my dark trench coat and pulled out my smartphone. The device was sleek, unassuming, and held the absolute power to annihilate their entire universe. I unlocked the screen, opening a highly secured, encrypted corporate file that my acquisitions team had compiled over the past 3 weeks. You want to talk about your solid software and your brilliant infrastructure, Marcus? I asked, holding the phone up. The soft blue light from the screen illuminated my face in the dim foyer. Let us talk about your actual numbers. Let us talk about the truth. I swiped my thumb across the glowing screen, pulling up the executive summary that my acquisitions team had spent the last 3 weeks verifying. The silence in the foyer was so absolute that the soft chime of my phone unlocking echoed like a gunshot. Marcus took another step backward, his eyes wide and unblinking, looking like a man standing on the trapdoor of a gallows. According to the certified financial disclosures you submitted to Apex Medical, your software firm generated $4 million in gross revenue last quarter. I said, projecting my voice so every single socialite investor and hotel staff member in the room could hear me perfectly. You claimed a 20% month-over-month user growth and projected full profitability by the end of this fiscal year. You presented these numbers as absolute facts to David Vance just 20 minutes ago. Those are projections based on the upcoming merger. Marcus stammered, his voice cracking violently. They are forward-looking statements, Kendra. You know how tech valuations work. You are taking them completely out of context. I am reading the reality of your miserable failures. I corrected him sharply. Your actual gross revenue for the past 24 months is zero. You have not sold a single software license since your initial launch, which failed spectacularly due to catastrophic coding errors. Your current active user base is exactly zero. You have been paying a click farm in Eastern Europe to generate fake user traffic on your servers to artificially inflate your metrics. A loud collective gasp rippled through the gathered crowd. David Vance crossed his arms tighter, his jaw clenched in absolute fury. He turned to one of his board members and offered a single confirming nod. They had suspected discrepancies, but hearing the raw, unfiltered truth exposed in public validated their worst fears. You have burned through $6 million of initial investor capital. I continued scrolling down the screen with deliberate, punishing slowness. And instead of investing that capital into research and development, you diverted it into shell companies to fund your personal lifestyle. You leased this luxury penthouse. You bought a custom wardrobe. You threw lavish yacht parties to bait new investors, paying for it all with money that was supposed to build medical infrastructure. Stop it, Marcus whimpered, covering his face with his trembling hands. Please, Kendra, stop saying these things out loud. Oh, I am not even close to finished, I said, my gaze shifting from my broken brother to his horrified wife. Lauren was staring at him as if he had just transformed into a terrifying monster. Her designer clutch slipped from her fingers, hitting the marble floor with a dull thud. Marcus has a current outstanding corporate debt of $9 million, I announced, looking directly at Lauren so she could fully absorb the magnitude of her husband's deceit. He has defaulted on 3 separate bridge loans. His employees have not received their matching retirement contributions in over a year because he drained the pension fund to pay for your anniversary trip to the Maldives. Lauren let out a sharp, breathless shriek. She lunged forward, grabbing Marcus by the lapels of his ruined tuxedo. Is she telling the truth? Lauren screamed, shaking him violently. Did you steal from your own employees to pay for my vacations? Tell me she is lying, Marcus. Tell me we are not broke. Marcus could not even look her in the eyes. He hung his head, silent tears of supreme humiliation leaking from his eyes and dripping onto his collar. His silence was the loudest confession possible. Lauren shoved him backward with all her strength, her face contorted with a mixture of profound shock and absolute revulsion. You disgusting fraud! Lauren shrieked, her voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers. You told me we were buying a private island next year. You told my father your company was going public. Lauren, please, Marcus begged, reaching out a trembling hand toward her. I was going to fix it. If the Apex deal went through tonight, I could have covered all the missing funds. We would have been fine. You were going to use my $30 million acquisition to cover your federal crimes. David Vance finally spoke, his deep voice slicing through the frantic argument like a razor blade. He stepped forward, radiating sheer executive power. You brought my board of directors to Atlanta under the pretense of a legitimate medical technology merger, when in reality, you are running a desperate, failing Ponzi scheme. Marcus dropped to his knees right there on the polished marble floor. He actually fell to his knees in front of David Vance, clasping his hands together in a pathetic display of total submission. Mr. Vance, I swear the foundational code is good. If you just give me a chance to explain the vision, I can make this right. I can build what you need. You will never build anything in this industry ever again, David said coldly, looking down at Marcus with complete disdain. My legal team will be contacting the federal authorities regarding the fraudulent financial documents you submitted to our acquisitions department. You are entirely finished. My mother, Beatrice, let out a loud theatrical wail. She rushed forward, throwing her arms around my shoulders, in a desperate, frantic attempt to physically restrain me from reading any more from the glowing screen of my phone. I violently recoiled from her touch, shoving her hands away with a forceful, uncompromising motion. Do not put your hands on me, I warned her, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that made her instantly freeze. Kendra, you have made your point. Beatrice sobbed, her carefully applied makeup running in dark, messy streaks down her face. You have ruined him. You have ruined the family name. Are you happy now? Just put the phone away. We can handle the rest of this privately behind closed doors. We do not need to air our dirty laundry here. Our dirty laundry has been hanging in the absolute center of this ballroom for years. Mom, I said, projecting my voice so that every single guest straining their necks to listen would not miss a single syllable. You just sprayed it with expensive perfume and demanded that everyone smile and call it couture. You do not get to demand privacy now that the stench is finally suffocating you. You invited these people here to witness a corporate triumph. They are simply going to witness a corporate execution instead. I turned my attention back to the glowing screen of my phone, my thumb scrolling past the executive summary and diving straight into the granular, undeniable data. Marcus let out a whimpering, pathetic sound, crawling forward on his hands and knees. He actually tried to grab the hem of my dark trench coat, but I took a swift step back, leaving him grasping at the empty air above the polished marble floor. Let us examine the operational expenses of your supposedly revolutionary tech empire, I announced, my voice slicing through the stifling tension of the grand foyer. For the past 24 months, Marcus Washington Software Solutions has reported a net profit of zero, not a single cent of legitimate revenue. Yet during that exact same 2-year period, your personal lifestyle expenditures have increased by over 400%. Lauren, who was still trembling beside the shattered remains of her champagne flute, wrapped her arms around her own torso as if trying to physically hold herself together. Her eyes darted frantically around the room, making contact with the wealthy socialites she had spent years trying to impress. They were looking back at her with absolute unfiltered pity and revulsion. Beatrice stood entirely frozen, her jaw trembling as the terrifying reality of the situation washed over her. You see, Lauren, I said, directing my gaze solely at her pale, terrified face. Marcus did not buy you that custom white Range Rover because he closed a massive software deal. He did not fund your 2-week luxury excursion to St. Bart's with venture capital. He did not purchase those 3 Hermes Birkin bags you love to flaunt at the country club using legitimate corporate dividends. Where did the money come from? Lauren whispered, her voice cracking violently. She sounded like a frightened child, entirely stripped of the arrogant superiority she had wielded against me in the hospital room just hours ago. He stole it from his own people, I stated firmly, letting the devastating truth drop like a concrete block onto the marble floor. Marcus has been systematically and intentionally embezzling funds directly from his employees' corporate pension accounts. A collective horrified gasp echoed through the lobby. Even David Vance, the stoic chief operating officer of Apex Medical, tightened his jaw in pure, unadulterated disgust. Embezzling from investors was one thing, but stealing the retirement savings of hardworking everyday employees was a line that even the most ruthless corporate titans found utterly reprehensible. That is a lie, Marcus cried out, his voice muffled, as he buried his face in his hands. I was just borrowing it. I was going to put it all back as soon as the Apex merger finalized. It was a temporary internal loan to maintain corporate optics. I had to keep up appearances so the market would trust me. You cannot authorize a temporary internal loan from a legally protected employee pension fund. Marcus, I corrected him, my tone dripping with absolute disdain. That is not a business strategy. That is a massive, highly illegal federal crime. You drained the retirement accounts of 75 innocent people. You stole the financial futures of the software engineers who worked 80-hour weeks trying to fix your broken, obsolete code. You stole from the administrative assistants who actually kept your fraudulent company running. You robbed them blind so you could buy your wife a diamond tennis bracelet for her birthday. Lauren let out a sharp, guttural scream. She lunged forward, grabbing Marcus by the shoulders of his sweat-drenched tuxedo and shaking him with a sudden, violent burst of adrenaline. "You stole from your employees to buy my jewelry. Do you know what my father is going to say about this? Do you know what this makes me look like to my friends?" "Lauren, please stop screaming," Marcus begged, trying to catch her hands. "I did it for us. I did it because you said you needed that lifestyle. You said you could not be seen in anything less than a luxury vehicle. I was trying to give you the world I promised you when we got married." "I married a successful tech visionary," Lauren shrieked, tears of sheer humiliation finally spilling over her expertly contoured cheeks. "I did not marry a broke, pathetic criminal who steals from his secretaries. You completely humiliated me in front of the entire city of Atlanta. I am ruined because of you." I watched them tear each other apart right there on the floor of the St. Regis. The perfect golden couple of Buckhead high society had been reduced to a screaming, sobbing mess of accusations and sheer panic. They had spent years mocking my life, calling me a socially unfit failure, because I drove a reliable sedan and lived within my means to provide for my sick daughter. Now the shiny, expensive cage they had built for themselves was collapsing inward, crushing them under the weight of their own monumental greed. "The federal authorities have already been notified," I announced, raising my voice to cut through their pathetic screaming match. "My acquisitions team at Apex Medical operates under strict ethical guidelines. When we uncovered the pension fraud during our mandatory due diligence review, we were legally obligated to report the discrepancies to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Labor. They have been building a massive case against you for the past 3 weeks. Every single fraudulent wire transfer has been fully documented and handed directly over to the authorities." Marcus stopped crying. He froze completely, his entire body going terrifyingly rigid. He slowly lifted his head, staring at me with eyes so wide and bloodshot they looked almost demonic. The realization of his impending reality was finally setting in. This was not a social embarrassment that could be smoothed over with a public relations campaign. This was the absolute end of his freedom. His entire fraudulent existence was over. "The feds," Marcus whispered, his voice completely devoid of any emotion. "You turned your own flesh and blood over to the federal government. You stopped being my flesh and blood the moment you told me to handle my dying daughter by myself because you were too busy," I replied coldly. "You committed wire fraud, bank fraud, and massive pension embezzlement. You are looking at a minimum of 20 years in federal prison, and you have absolutely no one to blame but yourself." Marcus collapsed completely against the base of a towering marble pillar, his body violently shaking as the crushing weight of a federal indictment finally broke him. He slumped forward, gasping for air like a drowning man, entirely stripped of his arrogant billionaire persona. I turned away from my pathetic brother, directing my full, unforgiving attention toward the woman who had orchestrated this entire tragedy. Beatrice stood frozen near the floral arrangements, her emerald silk gown suddenly looking like a heavy, suffocating shroud. She lunged forward again, her eyes wide with a frantic, animalistic terror. "Kendra, I am begging you to stop this madness right now," Beatrice shrieked, her voice cracking with sheer desperation as she reached out to grab my arm. I took a swift, tactical step backward, refusing to let her touch me. She looked around at the audience of wealthy socialites, her peers who were now whispering and pointing at her ruined family with unmasked disgust. "You have humiliated your brother enough. We can fix the pension fund. We can sell the luxury cars. Just tell David Vance to call off the federal agents. Please, you are utterly destroying our prestigious family name in front of the entire city. You destroyed the family name the exact minute you decided to fund a criminal enterprise," I replied, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings of the St. Regis foyer. But since you are so incredibly eager to talk about fixing massive financial mistakes, let us discuss how you managed to keep Marcus out of federal prison last month. You miraculously produced $400,000 in liquid cash to cover his immediate corporate debts and prevent an earlier financial audit. Where exactly did you get that money, Beatrice? Beatrice froze instantly. The frantic begging energy entirely drained from her rigid body, replaced by a cold, paralyzing terror. She pressed her lips together tightly, shaking her head in a silent, desperate plea for me to keep my mouth shut. Tell them, I commanded, projecting my voice so every single person in the room could hear me perfectly. Tell your elite country club friends and your prominent charity board members exactly how you funded your Golden Boy's fraudulent lifestyle, or I will gladly read the bank records out loud for everyone to hear right now. It was a private family loan, Beatrice stammered, her eyes darting nervously toward Marcus, who was still weeping uncontrollably on the floor. I secured a private confidential loan. It is nobody else's business. It became my business the exact second you decided to steal my identity to secure that capital, I stated, dropping the absolute heaviest hammer of the night. The wealthy crowd erupted into a fresh wave of horrified gasps. Even Lauren stopped screaming at Marcus, turning her tear-streaked face to stare at her mother-in-law in pure, unadulterated shock. That is right. I continued, holding up my smartphone so the glowing screen illuminated the dark foyer. When my acquisitions team at Apex Medical conducted their mandatory background checks on Marcus and his immediate corporate associates, we uncovered a massive discrepancy in your real estate holdings. You took out a massive second mortgage on our childhood estate in Buckhead. But because you had already maxed out your personal credit cards to maintain your lavish socialite image, the bank refused to approve the high-risk loan under your name alone. Beatrice covered her face with her trembling hands, letting out a wretched, guttural sob. She knew she was definitively caught. There was absolutely no avenue of escape left for her. So you committed felony identity theft, I announced to the captive audience. You forged my signature on the primary loan documents. You bribed a notary public. You used my pristine credit score and my social security number to act as the primary guarantor for a massive mortgage. You literally stole the identity of the daughter you spent years pretending did not exist, just to bail out the son who was actively stealing from his own employees. I had absolutely no choice, Kendra, Beatrice wailed, dropping her hands to reveal a face completely ruined by running mascara and sheer panic. The bank was going to seize his corporate accounts. Marcus promised me he would pay the mortgage back within 3 months. He swore to me that this highly anticipated merger with Apex Medical was a guaranteed success. He told me we would be drowning in millions of dollars by the end of the year. And you foolishly believed a man who has not told the truth a single day in his adult life, I replied with absolute icy disdain. You risked the family estate, the only tangible asset this family actually owned, on a desperate, pathetic gamble. You committed a severe federal crime to protect a hollow illusion of wealth. You truly believed I was just a broke, struggling single mother who would never have the financial resources to run a credit check or hire a lawyer to fight you. I am your mother! Beatrice screamed, her voice echoing shrilly across the marble floor. I gave you life. You owe me your absolute obedience. I only borrowed your name temporarily. It is not a crime when you do it for the survival of your own flesh and blood. It is absolutely a severe financial crime, Beatrice, David Vance interjected, stepping forward to stand firmly by my side. His towering presence radiated uncompromising corporate authority. Identity theft and mortgage fraud are highly severe federal offenses. When Ms. Washington's legal team discovered the forged documents, we immediately contacted the bank's National Fraud Department. They have already launched a full internal investigation into your entire financial history. Beatrice swayed precariously on her expensive designer heels, looking as though she might completely pass out from the shock. She reached out to grab the edge of a tall cocktail table, knocking over an empty glass. It shattered violently against the marble, sending glass flying across the floor, but nobody even blinked. The entire room was absolutely captivated by the total catastrophic destruction of the Washington family matriarch. You do not understand what you are doing to me, Kendra, Beatrice sobbed, her chest heaving with frantic, shallow breaths. If the bank investigates that loan, they will demand the money back immediately. I do not have $400,000. I spent my last available line of credit renting this ballroom tonight. If I default on that mortgage, they will take the house. They will take the entire estate. You already defaulted on the mortgage, Mom. I corrected her smoothly, delivering the final devastating piece of the puzzle with surgical precision. You missed the last 3 monthly payments because Marcus stopped sending you the stolen pension money. The bank initiated formal foreclosure proceedings last week. You are officially bankrupt. The word hung in the air like a physical blow. Bankrupt. In the elite money-obsessed circles of Buckhead High society, bankruptcy was a terminal disease. It was the ultimate unforgivable social sin. The wealthy socialites, who had previously tolerated Beatrice's arrogant behavior, were now actively backing away from her, treating her like a highly contagious leper. No, Beatrice whispered violently, shaking her head back and forth in total denial. No, no, no. The bank manager promised me a temporary extension. He said I had until the end of the month to produce the required funds. I have time to fix this. You had time until the fraud department realized the entire loan was secured using forged documents. I stated, my voice completely devoid of any sympathy or warmth. Once they verified that my signature was faked, they immediately accelerated the foreclosure process. The estate went to a private bank auction yesterday morning. Beatrice let out a harrowing, blood-curdling scream. She collapsed onto her knees, her beautiful emerald silk gown pooling around her on the cold, hard floor. She clutched her hair, weeping with a profound, terrifying intensity. The childhood home, the grand estate where she had hosted her prestigious charity galas and flaunted her wealth, was entirely gone. She had sacrificed her home, her freedom, and her daughter to protect a son who was currently sobbing on the floor right next to her. I looked down at the two people who spent my entire life making me feel like a worthless burden. I felt no pity. I felt no regret. I reached into the deep inner pocket of my dark trench coat and pulled out a white envelope. The thick paper felt satisfying against my fingertips. I took one step closer to my mother. My scuffed leather boots clicked sharply against the marble, making Beatrice flinch and look up at me. Her face was a horrifying mask of ruined makeup, pale skin, and utter despair. Do you know what happens to high-value properties when they hit the private bank auction block, Beatrice? I asked. They are immediately flagged by real estate acquisition algorithms. My portfolio managers at Apex Medical run a subsidiary holding company designed specifically to purchase distressed commercial assets. When your fraudulent mortgage defaulted, the system automatically alerted my chief financial officer. We watched the bank seize the estate and list it for a fraction of its market value to recoup the stolen capital. Beatrice shook her head violently, holding her hands up as if trying to physically block my words from entering her ears. No, Kendra, please do not say it. Please do not do this to me. That house is my entire life. It is the center of our family legacy. I hosted every major charity gala in that ballroom. I raised you in that house. You raised Marcus in that house, I corrected her, my voice turning to absolute ice. You kept me in a pale blue room in the back hallway and told your friends I was visiting relatives whenever you hosted your lavish parties. You used that house as a fortress to protect your golden child, and then you used it as a casino chip to fund his federal crimes. You do not get to claim a legacy that you willfully destroyed. I leaned down slightly, dropping the heavy white envelope directly onto the marble floor. It landed right in the center of Beatrice's emerald silk lap. She stared at it as if it were a venomous snake, her entire body trembling so intensely, her pearl necklace rattled against her collarbone. My holding company was the winning bidder at the bank auction yesterday morning, I announced, delivering the absolute unvarnished truth to the silent room. I wired the funds in full. The deed was legally transferred to my corporate portfolio at noon today. You do not own a single brick of that property anymore, Mom. You are currently a squatter living illegally in a house that I own free and clear. A sharp collective gasp rippled through the crowd of onlookers. David Vance, standing firmly behind me, nodded in silent approval. Lauren, who was still standing a few feet away, covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide with unadulterated shock. She was watching her mother-in-law get stripped of every single asset she possessed. Open the envelope, Beatrice, I commanded, my tone leaving absolutely no room for negotiation or delay. My mother let out a small, wretched whimper. Her manicured fingers shaking violently reached down and fumbled with the flap of the thick envelope. She pulled out a stack of legally notarized documents printed on heavy cardstock. The bold, black letters at the very top of the first page were unmistakable. That is a formal, legally binding 30-day eviction notice, I stated. You have breached the terms of residency by defaulting on the mortgage and occupying the premises under fraudulent pretenses. I am executing my right as the sole legal property owner to demand your immediate removal. You have exactly 30 days to pack your designer clothes, your expensive china, and whatever dignity you have left and vacate my property. 30 days? Beatrice shrieked, clutching the eviction notice to her chest as fresh tears poured down her ruined face. Where am I supposed to go, Kendra? I have absolutely no money. My credit cards are entirely maxed out. My bank accounts are frozen. You cannot throw your own mother out onto the street. I will be an absolute laughingstock. My friends will abandon me. Your friends have already abandoned you, I pointed out, gesturing to the wealthy socialites who were actively backing away from her and whispering furiously to each other. And I am not throwing you out onto the street. I am simply removing a hostile squatter from a multi-million-dollar real estate investment. Where you go is absolutely none of my concern. Perhaps Marcus can let you share his federal prison cell. Marcus let out another agonizing sob, burying his face deeper into his knees. He was completely useless. Beatrice stared at me, her chest heaving, her eyes searching my face for any lingering trace of the obedient, desperate daughter she used to manipulate. She found absolutely nothing. There was no warmth, no hesitation, no mercy. I had severed the emotional chains she had wrapped around my neck for 34 agonizingly long years. She was finally looking at the phantom daughter she created, and she was absolutely terrified of her. The magnificent grand foyer felt entirely paralyzed, trapped in a breathless vacuum as the reality of my words settled over the wealthy crowd. My mother, Beatrice, remained crumpled on the polished marble, her emerald silk gown spreading around her like a dark puddle. She gasped for air, clutching her perfectly styled hair, her chest heaving with violent, uncontrollable sobs. Right beside her, Marcus curled into a pathetic, trembling ball, his face pressed against his knees, muttering incoherent apologies to nobody in particular. The live jazz band had stopped playing minutes ago. The waiters stood frozen like statues holding silver trays of champagne. The elite socialites and wealthy venture capitalists watched the total destruction of the Washington family matriarch in fascinated horror. Nobody stepped forward to help her. In the ruthless, money-obsessed ecosystem of Atlanta, high society financial ruin was highly contagious, and my mother was officially patient zero. Lauren had been standing perfectly still near the shattered remains of her champagne flute. For the last 20 minutes, she had watched her entire fabricated universe burn to ashes. The realization hit her with the physical force of a freight train. She was not the envied wife of a brilliant tech visionary. She was legally bound to a penniless, federally indicted fraud who had stolen his employees' pensions to buy her affection. The lavish vacations, the designer wardrobe, the social prestige at the country club, it was all an elaborate criminal lie. You lied to me, Lauren whispered, her voice cutting through the sounds of Beatrice's weeping. Marcus flinched at the sound of his wife's voice. He slowly lifted his head from his knees, his face red and swollen with tears. He looked up at Lauren, his bloodshot eyes filled with a desperate, sickening kind of hope. He reached out a shaking hand toward her, his fingers brushing against the hem of her expensive designer dress. "Lauren, baby, please," Marcus begged, his voice cracking into a pathetic whine. "I can fix this. I promise you I can fix this. David Vance is just angry right now. I can find another investor. We can hire a good defense attorney and fight the federal charges. I did all of this for you. I did it to give you the beautiful life you deserve." Lauren stared down at him with an expression of pure, unadulterated revulsion. She physically recoiled, kicking her foot back so sharply that her heel struck Marcus in the wrist. "Do not touch me!" Lauren shrieked, her voice echoing violently across the marble floor. "Do not you ever put your hands on me again, you disgusting, pathetic fraud. You promised me a multi-million-dollar empire. You told my father your company was going public next year. You told my mother we were buying a private island in the Caribbean. You completely humiliated me in front of the entire city of Atlanta. I was trying to build our future. Marcus cried out, scrambling onto his knees and clasping his hands together like a beggar. I was trying to make you proud of me. You said you needed the luxury vehicles and the expensive jewelry. I just wanted to be the man you wanted. I wanted a successful billionaire. Lauren screamed at the top of her lungs, completely abandoning her polished high society persona. The veins in her neck bulged as her fury boiled over. I did not want a broke, incompetent criminal who steals money from his own administrative assistants. Do you have any idea what my country club friends are going to say about this? Do you know what this makes me look like? I am married to a squatter. My mother-in-law is a homeless, bankrupt squatter. Beatrice let out another harrowing wail from the floor, hiding her ruined face in her hands. The wealthy guests surrounding us began to openly murmur and point, entirely captivated by the brutal dissolution of the golden couple. Lauren, please do not leave me. Marcus sobbed, tears and sweat dripping from his chin onto the polished floor. I have absolutely nothing left. I need you. We took vows. Those vows were based on a fraudulent financial portfolio. Lauren spat coldly. She reached for her left hand. Her fingers clamped down on the massive, glittering diamond engagement ring that Marcus had purchased using embezzled corporate pension funds. With a violent, aggressive yank, she pulled the heavy ring off her finger. We are completely and utterly done, Lauren announced, her voice dripping with absolute venom. I am going back to Buckhead to pack my bags. I am calling my father's team of corporate lawyers first thing in the morning. I am filing for an immediate expedited divorce, and I will make absolutely certain that the judge knows I had absolutely no part in your disgusting federal crimes. You are going to rot in a federal prison, Marcus, and I am not going down with you. She raised her hand and threw the massive diamond ring directly at his face. The heavy jewelry struck Marcus sharply on the cheekbone before bouncing off and clattering loudly against the marble floor. It rolled a few feet away, coming to a stop near my scuffed boots. Marcus let out a devastated, broken gasp, clutching his face where the ring had hit him. He reached out blindly, his fingers scrambling across the cold floor, trying to reach the discarded symbol of his fake empire. Lauren did not wait to see if he found it. She hitched her designer handbag over her shoulder, turned her back on her weeping husband and her disgraced mother-in-law, and stormed toward the grand entrance of the St. Regis. Her heels struck the floor with furious, rapid precision. She shoved past the stunned valet attendants and disappeared into the cool Atlanta night, leaving the burning wreckage of her marriage entirely behind her. I stood perfectly still, watching the scene unfold with absolute chilling detachment. The golden boy of this Washington family was now a sobbing, abandoned heap on the floor, frantically searching for a diamond ring he could no longer afford. The matriarch, who had ruled her social circles with an iron fist, was a ruined, bankrupt squatter weeping over a 30-day eviction notice. The extravagant corporate gala designed to celebrate their glorious triumph had successfully transformed into a public execution of their entire legacy. I looked at the heavy mahogany doors of the VIP dining room. David Vance and the Apex Medical Executive Board members were watching me with silent, profound respect. I had orchestrated this entire evening flawlessly. I had allowed my family to climb to the very highest peak of their arrogant delusions before shattering the foundation and letting gravity do the rest. I took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs. The oppressive chains of their relentless emotional abuse had been completely severed. The heavy mahogany doors of the VIP suite remained open behind me. The executives of Apex Medical stood in absolute silence, bearing witness to the catastrophic collapse of the Washington family. Marcus was still hunched over on the cold marble floor, his hands desperately feeling around the base of the nearest column for the discarded engagement ring. Beatrice had completely lost her ability to form coherent sentences. She was hyperventilating, taking short, ragged breaths that rattled violently in her chest. Her perfectly manicured hands were clutching the front of her ruined emerald gown, as if trying to hold her physical heart inside her body. The surrounding crowd of Atlanta elite had formed a tight, suffocating circle around us, their eyes wide with morbid fascination. I did not offer my mother a comforting hand. I did not kneel to help my brother search for a diamond he bought with stolen pension funds. Instead, I slowly raised my left wrist and looked at the face of my watch. The silver hands glowed faintly in the dim light of the foyer. It was exactly 9:58 in the evening. 2 minutes left until the final, inescapable execution of their carefully curated fraudulent legacy. The timing could not have been more poetic if I had scripted it myself. I lowered my wrist, my gaze shifting from the dial to the trembling, pathetic form of my brother. Marcus! I said, my voice cutting through the ambient noise of the horrified onlookers with the precision of a surgical scalpel. He flinched at the sound of his name, slowly lifting his tear-stained, bloodshot eyes to meet mine. You really spared absolutely no expense for this grand promotional gala tonight, did you? You wanted to guarantee that every single prominent investor, every local politician, and every high society socialite in Buckhead witnessed your monumental triumph. Marcus swallowed hard, a thick, terrified gulp that made his Adam's apple bob sharply against his sweat-drenched collar. He had absolutely no idea where I was going with this line of questioning, but the sheer panic radiating from his body indicated he knew it was going to be devastating. I just wanted to make the family proud, he whimpered, his voice cracking violently. I just wanted everyone to see that I was a massive success. I wanted to be on the news. And you will be on the news, Marcus, I replied, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. In fact, if I recall your very aggressive promotional emails correctly, you paid a small fortune to have a live feed of the CNN Atlanta 10 o'clock broadcast piped directly into the main ballroom. You set up those massive high-definition projector screens over the main stage, so all of your wealthy guests could watch your philanthropic feature live. You tipped off the local media weeks ago, begging them to cover your supposedly massive corporate donations to the local hospitals to boost your public relations profile before the Apex merger. Beatrice suddenly stopped hyperventilating. She froze completely, her eyes darting frantically toward the heavy double doors of the main ballroom. The lively, upbeat jazz music had faded away, replaced by the low, expectant hum of the hundreds of guests inside who were waiting for the scheduled presentation to begin. The reality of my words slammed into her with the force of a runaway freight train. The local news was about to broadcast live to the entire gala. No! Beatrice gasped, scrambling onto her hands and knees. Her emerald silk gown tore slightly as she dragged herself across the polished marble floor toward the ballroom entrance. No, you have to shut the projectors off. Marcus, get up right now and tell the audiovisual team to cut the power to the main screens. Tell them there is a technical difficulty. We cannot let them broadcast anything right now. I stepped smoothly into her path, blocking her desperate route to the ballroom doors. You cannot shut it down, Mom. The audiovisual contract was prepaid and locked in. The technicians are operating from a secure booth on the upper balcony, and even if you could somehow manage to reach them, it would not matter in the slightest. The broadcast is hitting every single television screen in the entire state of Georgia. You wanted a massive audience to witness the glorious rise of the Washington family empire. You demanded that everyone pay attention to your golden boy. You are going to get exactly what you paid for. Marcus let out a horrifying guttural groan, burying his face directly into the cold floor. The federal investigators, he sobbed, his voice muffled by the marble. The Securities and Exchange Commission. You gave them the financial files 3 weeks ago. You tipped off the federal authorities about the pension embezzlement. That means the local news networks already have the press release from the Department of Justice. I did not just tip them off, Marcus, I stated, staring down at his broken form. I provided them with irrefutable, completely verified proof of your massive federal wire fraud. I handed them the forged mortgage documents Beatrice used to steal my identity. The authorities do not keep multi-million-dollar corporate fraud rings a secret. They make public examples out of them. I checked my watch one final time. It was exactly 9:59 and 50 seconds. 10 seconds left. I highly suggest you brace yourselves. The primetime feature is about to begin. Inside the massive ballroom, the ambient lighting suddenly dimmed to a dramatic theater-level darkness. The giant projector screens flanking the main stage flickered brightly, transitioning from a static corporate logo to the vibrant high-definition feed of the local news network. The sharp, unmistakable introductory music of the nightly broadcast echoed loudly through the open doors, spilling out into the foyer, and commanding the absolute attention of every single person in the hotel. The pinnacle of their social triumph was transforming into an execution. The crisp, highly produced intro graphic for the local evening news filled the towering projector screens inside the ballroom. The surround sound system, which Marcus had rented at an exorbitant premium to ensure his own voice would echo with godlike authority, now amplified the steady professional tone of the lead news anchor. Hundreds of wealthy guests, holding champagne flutes, fell completely silent. They turned their attention to the front of the room, expecting to see a glowing, prepackaged public relations feature about my brother's software firm. Marcus spent months hyping up this exact moment to his investors. He had promised them a prime-time feature showcasing his incredible corporate philanthropy. Instead, the anchor stared directly into the camera with an expression of profound gravity. The banner running across the bottom of the broadcast read, "Breaking News: Historic Medical Donation." Beatrice let out a high, reedy gasp, her manicured hands clawing at the collar of her ruined emerald gown. She tried to pull herself up using the edge of a cocktail table, but her legs completely refused to support her weight. She slid back down to the cold marble floor, her wide eyes locked onto the open double doors of the ballroom. Marcus remained completely paralyzed on his hands and knees. He did not blink. He did not breathe. He just stared into the brightly lit room as his meticulously constructed universe began to violently splinter into 1,000 pieces. "Good evening, Atlanta!" the anchor announced, his voice vibrating through the crystal chandeliers above our heads. "We begin tonight with an unprecedented and historic development in the local healthcare sector. For the past 3 years, a veil of absolute secrecy has surrounded a massive anonymous philanthropic trust funding specialized pediatric research. Tonight, that veil has finally been lifted." I stood perfectly still, my hands resting comfortably in the deep pockets of my dark trench coat. I glanced over at David Vance. The chief operating officer of Apex Medical offered a single tight nod of absolute approval. We had coordinated the press release perfectly. The timing was an absolute masterclass in corporate execution. "Earlier this evening," the news anchor continued, looking down at the papers on his desk before looking back into the camera. "A staggering $50 million private donation was formally processed and transferred to Atlanta General Hospital. The funds have been strictly allocated for the immediate construction of a new state-of-the-art pediatric cardiology wing. This historic contribution marks the largest single private donation in the history of the Georgia medical system. Hospital administrators have confirmed that the new wing will focus entirely on predictive artificial intelligence software designed to prevent catastrophic congenital heart failures in young children." The murmurs inside the ballroom began to swell. The socialites and venture capitalists shifted on their feet, exchanging deeply confused glances. This was not the software pitch Marcus had passionately promised them. This was not a story about a struggling tech startup breaking into the industry. This was monumental billionaire-level philanthropy. "A $50 million cash donation," Lauren whispered from her position near the coat check. She had stopped her frantic exit to listen, her face pale with absolute, unadulterated shock. She looked at me, her eyes tracking up and down my faded denim jeans and scuffed leather boots. "You wrote a $50 million check today, while we were telling you to go wait in the parking garage." I did not even bother to look in her direction. I kept my gaze fixed entirely on the large screens visible through the open ballroom doors. For years, the identity of this incredibly generous benefactor has been heavily guarded by a network of corporate lawyers and non-disclosure agreements. The anchor said, his tone shifting into one of profound respect. But moments ago, the trust officially released a statement unmasking the visionary behind this historic medical advancement. The screen cut from the anchor desk to a sleek, professionally captured photograph of me standing in front of the Apex Medical corporate headquarters. I was wearing a tailored navy blue suit, looking directly into the camera with absolute, uncompromising authority. The graphic below my face displayed my name in bold, unavoidable white text. "The anonymous donor has been revealed as Kendra Washington," the anchor announced loudly. Ms. Washington is the brilliant founder and chief executive officer of Apex Medical, a multi-billion-dollar healthcare technology corporation. Sources confirm that Ms. Washington developed the foundational predictive algorithm herself, driven by her own daughter's battle with a severe congenital heart defect. Today, as her daughter successfully recovered from open heart surgery, Ms. Washington chose to finalize this massive donation to ensure no other family has to face that terrifying ordeal without the absolute best technological resources available. The main ballroom erupted. It was not a polite ripple of applause. It was an explosion of frantic, chaotic shouting. Hundreds of voices overlapped in a sudden hurricane of shock and intense confusion. The investors who had come to the St. Regis Hotel to evaluate Marcus were now staring at a towering high-definition photograph of his sister, the phantom daughter. The woman Beatrice had spent years telling everyone was a massive unwed disappointment who lived overseas. Beatrice let out a harrowing, gut-wrenching wail. She pressed her forehead directly against the cold marble floor of the foyer, her shoulders heaving with violent, uncontrollable sobs. Her entire social circle was currently inside that ballroom. The prominent country club board members, the elite charity organizers, the wealthy wives she spent decades desperately trying to impress. They were all standing in there, realizing simultaneously that Beatrice Washington had been actively hiding a billionaire healthcare mogul in her basement while parading a fraudulent bankrupt son around as the family's golden child. The sheer, unmitigated humiliation was going to completely obliterate her standing in Atlanta high society. She would be an absolute laughingstock by morning. Marcus slowly pushed himself up from the floor, resting his weight on his trembling heels. He swayed unsteadily, his ruined tuxedo clinging to his sweaty frame as he turned his face toward the massive projector screens. The high-definition image of my face transitioned back to the news anchor, sitting at his sleek desk. Marcus looked like a man watching his own execution in real time, his jaw trembling so violently, his teeth audibly chattered. The wealthy guests in the ballroom had not stopped their frantic whispering. If anything, the noise had escalated into a chaotic, buzzing hive of scandalized socialites and panicking venture capitalists. They were all trapped in that room, forced to watch the final catastrophic act of my brother's fraudulent play. In related and rapidly developing business news tonight, the anchor continued, his professional tone cutting through the ambient noise of the St. Regis foyer. Apex Medical has officially released a secondary statement regarding their highly anticipated corporate acquisitions for the fiscal quarter. The multi-billion-dollar healthcare technology giant has formally announced that they are permanently halting all merger negotiations with Marcus Washington Software Solutions. The sudden termination of this $30 million buyout comes amid severe, deeply troubling allegations of massive corporate financial misconduct. Marcus let out a sharp, breathless wheeze. He grabbed the edge of the nearest cocktail table, his knuckles turning white as he desperately tried to keep himself from collapsing back onto the marble floor. Beatrice, who was still crumpled on the ground in her stained emerald silk gown, squeezed her eyes shut and covered her ears. She was trying to block out the reality of her ultimate social demise, but the broadcast echoed mercilessly through the high-vaulted ceilings of the luxury hotel. Every single person she had ever tried to impress was currently listening to her family's total destruction. Just moments before this broadcast, the news anchor stated, looking down at a breaking news alert on his desk. Federal investigators from the Securities and Exchange Commission, acting in coordination with the Department of Justice, executed a coordinated raid on the downtown Atlanta headquarters of Marcus Washington Software Solutions. Authorities are currently on site, actively seizing all corporate assets, computer servers, and financial records. Law enforcement officials have confirmed that the raid is part of a massive ongoing investigation into severe allegations of pension fraud and wire embezzlement. The ballroom erupted into absolute unfiltered chaos. It was no longer just shocked whispering. It was a stampede. The investors who had come to the gala under the pretense of evaluating a legitimate tech firm were now rushing frantically for the exit doors. They bumped into each other, spilling champagne and tripping over expensive evening gowns in their desperate scrambling haste to distance themselves from Marcus. Nobody in the cutthroat world of Atlanta, high finance, wanted to be photographed standing in the same room as a man currently being raided by the federal government. His toxic reputation was radioactive. The Department of Labor has reportedly joined the federal task force after whistleblowers provided irrefutable documentation showing that executive leadership systematically drained employee retirement accounts to fund lavish personal expenses, the anchor explained, as aerial footage of Marcus's downtown office building flashed onto the screen showing federal agents carrying boxes of evidence out the front doors. Authorities are currently seeking the chief executive officer, Marcus Washington, for immediate questioning regarding the missing pension funds. We will continue to provide live updates as this historic corporate fraud investigation develops. The broadcast cut to a commercial break, but the damage was permanent and irreversible. The grand ballroom emptied out like a sinking ship. The wealthy guests who had been drinking top-shelf liquor on my mother's fraudulent credit just minutes prior were now pushing past us in the foyer. They avoided making eye contact with Beatrice, stepping carefully around her sobbing form as if she were a piece of garbage discarded on the polished marble. The country club board members, the charity organizers, the elite wives she had spent decades worshipping, they all walked right past her without a word of comfort. Marcus let go of the cocktail table. He stumbled forward, his arms hanging limply at his sides. He looked at David Vance, then at me. His arrogant, entitled billionaire persona had been entirely incinerated, leaving nothing but a hollow, terrified shell of a man. The realization that federal agents were actively tearing his office apart and hunting him down had completely short-circuited his brain. He had no money to hire a defense attorney. He had no wife to support him. He had absolutely nowhere to run. "You called the feds," Marcus whispered, his voice incredibly hollow and devoid of any human emotion. "You actually gave them everything. The bank records, the fake user metrics, the pension transfers. You burned my entire life to the ground." "You burned your own life to the ground, Marcus," I replied, my voice projecting with chilling, uncompromising authority. "I simply handed the federal authorities the matches you left lying around. You chose to steal from innocent people. You chose to fund a fraudulent lifestyle using money that belonged to your hardworking employees. You chose to let Beatrice forge my signature to secure a mortgage you could never repay. You built this explosive trap entirely by yourself. I just decided to stop standing between you and the detonator." David Vance stepped up beside me, radiating an intimidating aura of absolute corporate supremacy. He looked down at my brother with an expression of pure, unadulterated disdain. "Apex Medical operates with uncompromising ethical standards," David stated firmly. "When Ms. Washington presented the evidence of your financial crimes during our due diligence review, we immediately fulfilled our legal obligation to report your activities. Your blatant attempt to use our corporation to cover up your federal embezzlement was a catastrophic miscalculation." Beatrice let out a harrowing, guttural scream from the floor. "He is your own brother," she wailed, pounding her fists against the cold marble. "How could you betray your blood? You have doomed him to federal prison." "Blood does not grant you absolute immunity from the law, Mom," I replied, my voice slicing through the frantic, buzzing atmosphere of the grand foyer like a sharpened blade. "And blood certainly did not stop you from forging my signature, draining my grandfather's trust, and leaving me to face my daughter's open-heart surgery completely alone. You and Marcus made a series of highly calculated, deeply criminal choices to fund a fake, pretentious lifestyle. I simply refuse to be the collateral damage in your fraudulent schemes any longer. You did not just doom him to federal prison. You handed him the keys, and he eagerly locked the cell door himself." Beatrice stared up at me, her chest heaving with ragged, desperate breaths. The emerald silk gown she wore like a royal mantle was now stained and wrinkled, pooling around her on the cold marble floor. She looked frantically around, searching the faces of her wealthy country club associates, her prominent charity board members, and the elite wives she had spent 3 decades desperately trying to impress. She was looking for a single shred of sympathy, a solitary hand reaching out to pull her back up from the bottom of the social hierarchy. She found nothing but cold, unfiltered revulsion. The prominent socialites, who previously kissed her cheek and drank her expensive champagne, were now actively turning their backs. They gathered their designer coats and quickly moved toward the valet stand, whispering furiously among themselves. In the ruthless, highly competitive ecosystem of Atlanta, high society financial ruin was treated like a highly contagious disease. Beatrice was officially radioactive, and her entire meticulously curated social empire had just evaporated into dust in less than 5 minutes. Marcus remained paralyzed on the floor, his hands covering his ears as if trying to block out the relentless sound of the local news broadcast still playing inside the main ballroom. The anchor was currently detailing the specific federal charges the Department of Justice was preparing to file against him. He had absolutely no money, no corporate assets, and no wife to support him. Lauren had already vanished into the night, undoubtedly dialing her father's corporate attorneys to file for an expedited divorce before the federal authorities could freeze her personal bank accounts. I looked at my ruined family one last final time. I felt no anger left in my chest. I felt no sorrow, no pity, and no lingering sense of obligation. The heavy, suffocating chains of their relentless emotional abuse had been completely and permanently severed. "You told me to handle it, Mom," I said softly, making absolutely certain she heard every single syllable over the chaotic noise of the fleeing guests. I handled it. I turned my back on them and walked purposefully toward the grand glass doors of the St. Regis Hotel. David Vance and the Apex Medical Executive Board members stepped aside, parting like the Red Sea to let me pass. David offered a respectful nod, silently confirming that the massive corporate acquisition of Marcus's fraudulent firm had been successfully and officially terminated. The path ahead of me was entirely clear. I pushed through the heavy doors and stepped out into the crisp, cool Atlanta night. The overwhelming, pretentious scent of expensive floral arrangements and desperate social climbing faded, instantly replaced by the clean, refreshing breeze carrying the faint smell of incoming rain. I walked down the red-carpeted stairs and handed my valet ticket to the attendant. He brought my practical 5-year-old sedan around to the front drive, his demeanor entirely respectful. He had undoubtedly heard the news broadcast echoing from the lobby. I slipped a $100 bill into his hand, slid into the driver's seat, and pulled out onto the glittering city streets. The drive back to the hospital felt entirely different from the frantic, anxiety-riddled journey I had taken just an hour prior. My hands gripped the steering wheel loosely. My shoulders dropped, releasing decades of built-up tension. I turned the radio off, savoring the profound, beautiful silence within the car. I had completely reclaimed my identity, my wealth, and my family legacy. I had successfully dismantled the toxic foundation my mother and brother built, ensuring they could never again use my name or my resources to fuel their deceitful, manipulative lives. When I finally walked back through the sliding glass doors of the intensive care unit, the sterile, bright lights of the hospital felt incredibly welcoming. The rhythmic, steady beeping of the medical monitors was a comforting, familiar symphony. I quietly pushed open the heavy wooden door to Zuri's recovery room. Mrs. Higgins, the dedicated head nurse, was sitting in the exact same chair where I had left her, diligently charting my daughter's vital signs. She looked up and smiled warmly, stepping aside so I could approach the bed. I took off my dark trench coat, draped it over the visitor's chair, and sat down close to my beautiful, resilient little girl. Zuri's color looked significantly better. The frightening pallor had faded, replaced by a soft, healthy warmth. I gently took her small, fragile hand in mine, being careful not to disturb the intravenous lines delivering her medication. A few hours later, just as the sun began to peek over the Atlanta skyline, casting a soft golden light through the hospital window, Zuri slowly fluttered her eyes open. She blinked against the morning light, her gaze shifting until she found my face. A weak, tired, but incredibly beautiful smile spread across her lips. She squeezed my fingers gently, a silent, powerful confirmation that the worst of the storm had finally passed. She was completely safe. I was entirely free. The people who had callously thrown us away were left standing in the ashes of their own monumental greed, facing the exact consequences they so richly deserved. We had each other, and for the first time in my entire life, that was more than enough. The story of Kendra serves as a powerful, necessary reminder that our true worth is never defined by those who are committed to misunderstanding us. For years, she endured the suffocating expectations and the relentless belittlement of a family that viewed her quiet brilliance as a flaw. They demanded she shrink herself to carefully accommodate her brother's fragile ego, weaponizing their conditional love to maintain a toxic hierarchy. However, her ultimate triumph did not come from finally proving her success to them, but from realizing that she no longer needed their validation at all. The profound lesson here is about the vital importance of protecting your peace and establishing strict, uncompromising boundaries. When people consistently show you that they only value you as a convenient resource or a scapegoat, you must believe them the very first time. Kendra's decision to silently build her own empire entirely independent of her family's toxic ecosystem illustrates that true empowerment often requires walking away from the table where respect is no longer being served. We simply cannot force people to recognize our value, especially when their own comfort relies heavily on keeping us permanently positioned beneath them. Instead of wasting her precious energy, arguing with her parents' massive delusions, or engaging in her brother's petty competitions, she used that same energy to forge a life of absolute financial and emotional independence. She ultimately reclaimed her grandfather's legacy and her own personal dignity, not through a screaming match, but through cold, calculated action. Her journey teaches us that sometimes the most profound form of revenge is simply recognizing your own undeniable power and decisively cutting the cord. If you have ever had to completely walk away from a toxic family environment to protect your inner peace, please share your empowering journey in the comments below.